while that was going on, more and more people were coming into the store and calling about the ads. And then something happened. It was a Monday morning in January of 2004, and it was snowing. And I got a call, and I'm going to admit to you, I was real crabby that day. I had had a real rough morning with a client, and I wasn't in the mood to take a call, but I thought I'll take it. It was an elderly gentleman who said that his wife wanted to speak to me, but she was too shy. So he was calling on her behalf, and you could hear her kind of laughing in the background. And he said, "We love your story, Ed, so much that we've started to collect our favorites, and now our refrigerator is covered with them." And it was lovely, this conversation. And then he went on to talk about stories. And he said, "I just have a question before I say goodbye. If you can write these kind of stories about these people and make us wonder what happened to them, what happened to the furniture, what about that chair that got stolen, I just wonder, have you ever thought of writing a book?" And I said yes, and we talked a minute more, and I thanked him. And it was like my body was electrified. Have you ever seen something or heard something in your lives? I'm sure you all have, where you feel it. It becomes part of you. And I got up from my desk and walked to the front window. And that moment is forever imprinted on me. I watched the snow come down. And I turned and looked at my studio that I loved. And I knew I was going to leave it. I knew this was it. I made my decision within minutes. That was it. And I went home that night to tell my husband, whom I was sure was going to say, "What are you thinking?" But he didn't. He calls me Queenie. He said, "Queenie, do it. Do it. You have worked yourself to death for years. Do it." And so I told my business partner the next day that I wanted to leave. And within 90 days, I signed the papers. I was no longer an owner. I was no longer a president. And I was real surprised. I thought my ego would be damaged. And instead, it was like 1,000 birds being released from their cages. I was free. And it wasn't that I didn't love my employees and love my clients. I did, but I needed to go after this. And I made up my mind that if it didn't work, I'd open another studio. I'd wash cars. I'd clean houses. I loved to garden. I gardened for people. It didn't matter. I had to go after this dream. I had to do it. And of course, people said I was crazy. And those people they're no longer my friends. Because it's really interesting when you do go after your dream, sometimes people back up from you because it shines something on them that maybe they don't want to deal with. And I was really kind of hurt that I had so many friends that just kept telling me I was crazy. And of course, the farm girl that I am, that stubborn girl, I said, "I'll show you, watch me." So I kicked off my high-heeled shoes. I put on the oldest pair of sweatpants I could find, took my husband's old shirts out of his closet, rolled up the sleeves, and I began to write. And I was going to write a story about something that happened to me. There's a reason that I am an honorary Southerner, and a reason that I love the South so much. When I was 9 years old, my great-aunt, Mildred Caldwell, whom the book is dedicated to, she called and asked if my mama, if I would like to come visit her in Danville, Kentucky. Well, I'm a little farm girl. I have never been outside of this little itty-bitty town, but I went on the train to visit my Aunt Mildred Caldwell. And she picked me up in this big old black Buick, and she was itty-bitty, and the steering wheel's up here, and she's driving me through town, talking, chattering like a sparrow. I don't know how we got there, just talking, and I'd never seen anything like the homes, the trees, the gardens. Well, we pulled into this driveway, and up ahead was this big white Greek revival home with all these trees. And she just stopped and said, "Here we are, showed up." Well, I'd never seen anything like it. And we went in, and there were antiques everywhere, and there were oriental rugs that were so worn and passed down from generation to generation that they were slightly threadbare here and there. And she had these Scotty dogs that she loved, and they just ran all over the house, and they'd shoot on the fringes of everything, and oh, she just loved them. And I noticed at dinner, night after night at dinner, we would use good china and silverware and iron linens. And I finally asked her, and I called her Annie Murray. I said, Annie Murray, this is good. She said, yes. I said, well, my mom only uses good for birthdays and special occasions. And she said, and I'll never forget it, sugar, every day is special. Every single day. So down here, that's what I do. We celebrate and we use what we have. We enjoy it because you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. And since that day, I've always used whatever I thought was special. When it gets broken or worn out, so what? I'm living it. Well, my aunt had a housekeeper cook named Betty. She was the first African-American person that I had ever had true interaction with. And I fell in love with Betty. I loved her dialect. I loved her attitude of life, and I wanted to keep hanging in the kitchen. But my aunt, of course, wanted to take me to all these museums and driving me around, and I loved that too. But my joy was going back in the kitchen with Betty. Well, Betty was a character. And one day the gardener came in, and I heard them talking, and the gardener was talking to her about someone who had hurt her feelings in town. And she was mad. And he said, well, Betty, what are you going to do? And I'm peeking around the edge watching this, and she picked up this big old pot, and she slammed it on the stove. And then she said, well, I could stay mad, but it'd take too much time out of my day. And I never forgot that, and I've never stayed mad longer than a day, ever. Because that was imprinted on me as a child, and I just thought that is the best thing I've heard. And I enjoyed my stay there so much. And I'm not saying anything negative about Northerners, because by heritage I'm a Northerner. But what I learned from my visit in the South, there are certain manners and customs that I embraced and I love so much. You Southerners are all so kind. You're so willing to step forward and help someone and to say a nice word. And it's not that we Northerners aren't. It's just that we're not as open and I don't think as gracious as Southerners are. And I became at 9 years old an honorary Southerner. And I knew I was going to get my tail to the South no matter what. And I did. I got across that Mason-Dixon line and bought that old house in Kentucky, and I plan on coming further south. And I'd already do it, except that I love my home so much I can't leave it, and I planted so many peonies I don't know what to do with them. So that was the story I thought I was going to write. And I began writing it. And then came something that is known as writer's alchemy, although I didn't know what it was. I thought it was unique to me, you know, I'm just so special. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was a crazy writer. I would write all day. My poor husband would come home, and I'd still be in my pajamas. I'd be horrified that I hadn't even done anything with myself. That's how much I loved writing. Well, at 2 o'clock in the morning, I heard a voice, physically heard a voice. And the little girl told me her name was Cece Monica. And I get real emotional about it because it was the most magical moment of my life. I didn't know that I would hear her voice, but I did. Well, I took my document that I was working on and dragged it right into the trash on my computer, opened up a new document, and I listened to what this little girl had to say. And her life was similar, pardon me, to my life. In the fact that she was a northern girl, but unlike my life, that my mother was not mentally ill. She was not the 1951 Medea onion queen. But Cece had a story to tell me, and so I decided I would listen. And I wrote feverishly for the first 3 or 4 months. My fingers just flew over the keyboard, and I knew I was onto something. And then all of a sudden, Thelma Ray Goodpepper showed up